The rain, it don't seem right. I always go right.
When comparing Wattie Buchan, the outspoken frontman of The Exploited, with Tim Armstrong, the creative force behind Rancid, we are essentially looking at two different yet connected branches of punk rock history. Both musicians have been deeply influential in their own right, but they embody contrasting styles, attitudes, and cultural legacies within the punk world. Wattie Buchan emerged in the early 1980s during the second wave of British punk, when social unrest, unemployment, and anger toward government policies were at their peak in the United Kingdom. As the voice of The Exploited, Watti became an icon of raw aggression, uncompromising political commentary, and unapologetic rebellion. His approach was loud, direct, and confrontational, with songs like Punk's Not Dead serving as anthems for disenfranchised youth. Watti has always represented the hardcore punk ethos-shaped head, aggressive delivery, and an unrelenting focus on chaos and resistance. For him, punk was about survival in a hostile system, a weapon of anger more than artistry. Tim Armstrong, on the other hand, rose to prominence in the 1990s with Rancid after first playing in Operation Ivy. His brand of punk carried the influence of ska, reggae, and even classic rock, making his work more musically diverse than Watti's straightforward assault. While Armstrong shares the same roots of rebellion, his lyrical themes often extend beyond direct political outrage, addressing community, personal struggles, and resilience. Tim's raspy vocals and loose guitar style became instantly recognizable, and his ability to blend underground authenticity with mainstream accessibility allowed Rancid to reach a wide audience. Watti cultivated notoriety by embracing controversy and remaining staunchly underground. Armstrong showed that punk could evolve and reach broader stages without entirely losing its soul. Watti is the embodiment of punk's raw fury, a figure who never compromised even when his views sparked outrage. Armstrong, meanwhile, demonstrated punk's adaptability, helping to carry its message into the new millennium through both music and his work with Hellcat Records, which supported countless punk and ska bands. Punk roots. When discussing the punk roots of Wattie Buchan and Tim Armstrong, one inevitably steps into two different yet equally defiant worlds of punk rock. Wattie Buchan, the outspoken frontman of The Exploited, embodies the raw, aggressive, and uncompromising spirit of the early British street punk movement. His roots are firmly tied to the working-class anger of late 1970s and early 1980s Scotland, where punk was more than just music. It was a protest against unemployment, government policies, and social decay. Buchan's approach to punk was rooted in confrontation, simplicity, and pure rage. Songs like Army Life and Fuck the System illustrate his deep connection to anarcho-street culture and the confrontational ethos that gave birth to UK 82 punk. Tim Armstrong, on the other hand, represents a different lineage of punk, one that is equally rebellious but infused with creativity and evolution. Coming out of the late 1980s and early 1990s Berkeley punk scene, Armstrong's roots were shaped by the DIY ethics of Operation Ivy and later Rancid. Unlike Buchan's raw fury, Armstrong blended punk with ska, reggae, and rockabilly influences, showing how punk could evolve without losing its subversive core. His lyrical style leaned toward storytelling about street life, friendship, and survival, reflecting the East Bay's melting pot of cultures. Where Buchan delivered a clenched fist of outrage, Armstrong gave a narrative voice to the outcasts and wanderers of California. Contrast in their punk roots also reflects geography and historical timing. Buchan grew from a Britain riddled with Thatcher-era unrest, where punk was a weapon of class struggle. Armstrong grew from an American subculture trying to carry the torch of 1977 punk into a new era, finding ways to merge it with other sounds while keeping its authenticity. Both were fiercely DIY, but Buchan stayed closer to the brutal, minimalist aesthetic, while Armstrong pushed punk into a broader musical landscape that could reach both underground squat shows and mainstream stages. Political stance. Wattie Buchan is often remembered for his raw, aggressive, and unapologetic approach. His political stance is rooted in anger at the system, the government, and societal oppression. Buchan embodies the traditional anarcho-punk ethos, though with a more nihilistic twist. Songs like Fuck the System and Army Life are confrontational, targeting corruption, war, and exploitation of the working class. His politics are less about structured ideology and more about direct rebellion, shouting against authority in all forms. Watti represents a voice of frustration, someone who channeled the fury of the unemployed, the marginalized, and the disenfranchised into pure street-level aggression. His stance is often chaotic, but undeniably authentic, reflecting the destructive energy of the 1980s UK punk scene. In contrast, Tim Armstrong's political stance is shaped more by storytelling, solidarity, and community. As co-founder of Rancid and former member of Operation Ivy, Armstrong carries the banner of punk with a strong influence from ska and reggae's themes of unity and resistance. His lyrics are political, but more grounded in narratives of survival, loyalty, and social justice. Songs like Time Bomb or Roots Radicals are not outright manifestos, but instead weave stories of working-class struggle and immigrant experiences in America. Armstrong's stance is inclusive, often emphasizing collective resilience rather than nihilistic rage. His politics tend to be more subtle and infused with hope, drawing from a belief in togetherness rather than destruction. Influence on punk. Wattie Buchan emerged from the chaotic streets of Edinburgh in the early 1980s, at a time when British punk had already shifted from its late 70s origins to a harsher, more aggressive form. As the snarling frontman of the exploited, Watti became a symbol of raw defiance, channeling working-class anger and disdain for authority into confrontational anthems. His aggressive vocals and uncompromising stance helped solidify the hardcore punk and UK 82 movement, inspiring countless bands who sought speed, aggression, and street-level authenticity. For Watti, punk was not about fashion or commercial success, it was about rebellion and survival, a direct confrontation with society and its failures. His influence lies in his ability to keep punk raw, furious, and politically charged. Tim Armstrong, on the other hand, rose from the California punk scene in the late 80s and early 90s, bringing a different vision of punk's potential. As guitarist, vocalist, and primary songwriter of Rancid, Armstrong fused street punk grit with melodic hooks, ska rhythms, and storytelling that reflected working-class struggles in a distinctly American context. Unlike Watti's relentless aggression, Tim emphasized accessibility and connection. His songwriting blended anger with empathy, allowing punk to resonate beyond underground circles. Armstrong also became a key figure in keeping punk relevant during the 1990s, when bands like Rancid, Green Day, and The Offspring broke into mainstream awareness. His influence extends beyond music as well. Through his label Hellcat Records, he supported countless punk, ska, and alternative acts, ensuring that the spirit of independence thrived. In comparison, Wattie Buchan represents the uncompromising purist, a guardian of punk's raw fury and its role as a weapon against authority. Tim Armstrong represents punk's evolution into a more inclusive and far-reaching movement, balancing street authenticity with broader appeal. Where Watti shouted war cries from the barricades, Tim offered anthems that could be sung by stadium crowds without losing their roots.